and welcome to another exciting episode of Track Talk Live. I am Miss Choo Choo, and I am joined with Mr. Clickety, and we are here to answer your questions and hopefully talk a lot about trains. So, Doug, where have you been since our last live event?
Well, I have to tell you, I've had actually an experience of a lifetime. I just returned from a trip out west chasing the newly restored Union Pacific big boy that hasn't operated for close to 60 years.
Wow.
It took 3 years worth of renovation work to get it running, and the inaugural run was from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Ogden, Utah to help celebrate the 150th anniversary of the connecting of the transcontinental railroads at Promontory, Utah. So it was a big thing. I wasn't the only one chasing it. There were a lot of people out there, but it was really a fantastic trip, and we'll see some pictures later.
Cool. Did you bring anything with you today to show us?
Well, I've been thinking about, we like to say that model railroaders like things that are free.
Yes, always.
So I just brought some samples, and we're going to talk a little more about this, but various kinds of stirring sticks and
popsicle sticks?
Popsicle sticks, stirring sticks,
some straws, it looks
well,
like.
Well, here's some smaller stirring sticks, and if you go to a coffee shop, you can grab these things. You don't even have to buy coffee, probably. The one thing I didn't bring was I actually have also used chopsticks.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about bringing a chopstick, but here are some different, for example, bigger size straws. And I grabbed the various styles because I use these for different things. I use these for conduit, for electrical hookup, like lights in a building, as an example. Mm-hmm. They could be used for downspouts, smaller ones. The bigger items can be used for, say, a pipe load or a culvert. Mm-hmm. Now this one here, this is a flexi straw that I got at a restaurant, and it looks like if you paint it silver, I'll hold it this way, if you paint it silver, you can actually see on the top there, it looks an awful lot like a culvert.
Yeah.
So, and these are kind of neat, these flexi straws, because you can use those for various kinds of piping, because they'll bend and they actually look at, when you put it together, it looks like a pipe elbow. Yeah. And these can be painted, pipe color, black, silver, any rusty, color, and that kind of thing. So, and here's a few more. Just they come in different lengths, and as long as they're free, what the heck, get a good sampling.
Yeah.
I have just a big cup, a big gulp kind of a cup, at home, and I just put all this stuff in there. If I'm looking for something, hey, I got it. So.
Yeah, it's always good to use unconventional materials. Yeah. We actually have a relevant clip from the website that we'd like to show you, introducing different kinds of household items that you can use and how they look in your layout. And this is from Monroe Stewart's Hooch Junction Railroad. So we're going to run that clip, and you can get an idea of what that looks like.
Now, the mouthwash bottle cap had the grooves sanded off of it. And that's actually the furnace in the PET furnace.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the shampoo bottle, if you look right next to it, it's the same shape with another cap on it right here. Mm-hmm. A typical piece of PVC pipe can be found right here in the various furnaces. A combination of PVC pipe can be found, along with the wooden dowel, can be found in the stacks.
You're just making these, you're making shapes. You don't necessarily have to know what they do. You're just
right,
shapes.
Right. Dean knows what they do. I just make the shapes that look like what they do. Now, the shower cap container, you can see here next to this small stack.
It's all in the matter of painting, isn't it? Painting is
all in the matter of painting and relationships and placement. Now here's a piece of PVC piping with a cone on the bottom out of styrene. And we did the same thing with a smaller piece of pipe, and you'd have this shape. And you stick a cap on the top and fill it up with a little wood filler. There you are, or plastic filler. There's that shape. Here we have a commercial water tower kit. And here's that cosmetic cream that is similar to the same size, same shape as a water tower. So with some legs and some bracing and a walkway around it, we can pretty much duplicate this water tower.
All right, so there are a bunch of great examples in that video and that you brought with us, Doug, but if you're looking for even more great examples of things that you can use for scenery that you maybe find around your house, if you look below the chat roll on this video, we have a banner where you can download the free 10 household items perfect for scenery, so you can get even more ideas in there. It's below the chat roll video, you just click it and you can download the free guide. But other than that, I think you have some photos to share with us.
Yeah, that was super. And now, yes, I do have some photos, a little bit of everything, starting with my trip. This is a picture of the Big Boy, and it's an amazing locomotive. It's actually the largest locomotive operating in the world.
Wow.
And it sat in a park in California for about 60 years.
Wow.
And they brought it back and restored it. So it's a fantastic piece of work. The Union Pacific Railroad deserves all kinds of credit for putting the time and effort into getting this locomotive running again. And it actually will be touring the country.
Oh, really?
So if you go to UP, I think it's up.com, if you go to their website, they will actually, it may not be up yet, but this summer they'll actually have a schedule of various major cities that are served by the Union Pacific where that locomotive's going to be visiting. So there's another, just a cab picture. My buddy Tom, who traveled with me, is up there getting a cab ride. But it's just an amazing piece of machinery. Whether you have a little in-scale model that's 6 inches long, or you have something like this that's 120 feet long, they're all pieces of machinery, and they're just an amazing, amazing piece of work. So there's me standing next to the Big Boy. This is a shot I wanted to show. This is, we were in Evanston, Wyoming, and this is an old machine shop building from the Union Pacific that has been turned into an event space. So it's restored correctly on the exterior, you know, and then they use the interior for something else. But it's basically, structurally it's all correct, but it's a great reuse of a structure that otherwise would probably normally just be knocked down, you know. And it becomes an event space that attracts tourists and conventions and things from the area. Yep. And then this is actually inside their old roundhouse, so you can kind of see the roundhouse windows on the left-hand side there. But they have an elevated seating area in the center background there, and they do weddings and all kinds of conventions and things. And I think it's a wonderful reuse of an old railroad building that might otherwise be gone. The next thing I wanted to show you, this is kind of applies to modeling. We went to see the Heber Valley Railroad in Heber City, Utah, on the way to Ogden, and they were working on an old Union Pacific locomotive, and they had a part. And I just wanted to show some inside the shop pictures, just for modeling for people who want to detail the inside of a shop building. Now here's another piece of gear that you can see that there's a huge lathe, and they're turning a wheel set on the lathe. So you can see all the stuff sitting around which you can actually model. Hoses and, you know, the boards leaning up on the left there. A lot of good ideas for modeling the inside of a shop building. And here's another picture. These are the drivers for that locomotive. So they had the drivers out and sitting there ready to be reinstalled. Wow. So I think that's pretty cool, actually. Just, you know, big boys playing with big tools, heavy stuff. And this, I took these pictures. This was in Granger, Wyoming, and we just happened to be waiting for the Big Boy to go through. But we had talked about, in previous shows, about butting together various rail sizes. And I had a picture, I think it was last month, I had a picture. Right here's another example of 2 different sizes of rail butted together in the real thing. Cool. And then here is an insulated rail joint for signaling on the real railroad. So they use, you know, something very similar to what a model railroader would use. You can see there's a little piece of fiber in between the rails, so the actual ends of the rails don't touch. That's kind of a white piece. Cool. And then the orange connector. So that's all insulated electrically for signaling. And the Union Pacific has some of these trucks. It's called a Brandt truck. It's like the biggest truck you ever saw in your life. And I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but actually in the front bumper there's the real railroad coupler that'll swing out. Yeah. And they actually use this thing. It'll actually tow real railroad cars. Cool, wow. With the big coupler. It's just an amazing, amazing truck. And it happened to be there, so I had to take a picture of it. And we saw a lot of yellow on our trip.
Oh, really?
Because yellow Union Pacific diesel locomotives, and so I just thought I'd throw an orange locomotive in there. This was up on near Bill, Wyoming, on the coal lines. And this is my buddy Lindsay. This is going back to when he got to Ogden. This is going back to the Utah State Railroad Museum at the Ogden Union Station. So my buddy Lindsay on a Southern Pacific caboose, because we both like Southern Pacific. And this is a picture of the combined Union Pacific and Southern Pacific Historical Society's convention at the Marriott Courtyard Hotel in downtown Ogden. Downtown Ogden was just full of people for all these events. Not only was it the historical event, but the Golden Spike event, and it was just full of people. And this one was, this is back to the Railroad Museum at the Ogden Station. This is the Union Pacific turbine locomotive that was built as a kind of they made a few of the experimental locomotives, and they actually were powered with a jet engine.
Wow, cool.
And that's on display there at Ogden. I thought that was pretty neat. Now, this is something I wanted to show. These are actual models of the locomotives that were used at the Golden Spike ceremony in 1869, 150 years ago. And there was actually a LGB booth there, and they actually modeled these locomotives on 1/29th scale for people who want to buy them as collector models. And so they were at the booth there, and I thought I'd show them. So this is one of the models. They're all made out of brass.
Oh, really?
Beautiful, beautiful. Made by one of the best Korean locomotive builders, who builds a lot of models for other size trains. That's the Jupiter. That's the Central Pacific locomotive that was there from California. And this is the Union Pacific 119, which was the other locomotive that was there, touching pilots 150 years ago. And then I wanted to mention another place we went was the Colorado Model Railroad Museum. This is a really great place. It's in Greeley, Colorado, and they have a fantastic model railroad in there.
Do they?
They do. It's really, really cool. And so I wanted to show their brochure. And then here's just a couple of pictures I took inside. They have an elevated walkway, and you can see the building actually has a full-size restored caboose inside of it. You can see in the background
I see that there.
Actually, a fantastic place. So there's another shot of it. If you get a chance to get out to Greeley, this is really something worth seeing. And that's the end of my pictures.
All right, cool. Well, then I think it's time to ask some questions.
All right.
So by all means, keep asking questions. We have some in the chat, but keep asking more. We'll answer as many as we do as we have the time to let us allow. Sorry, misphrasing there. But make sure you ask them in the Track Talk Live May 2019 box. It's outlined in like a dark blue. Don't ask them in the smaller chat box that's gray that says chat. That just goes to customer service. So make sure you put it in the blue outline chat box so that we can see it right now. Otherwise, we might not see your question. So without further ado, Doug, our first question is from Jim in Oregon, who asks, is there a place I can get a 3D printable railroad trestle in N scale that I can print on my 3D printer?
Well, you know, to be honest, I haven't seen one, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised if somebody hasn't done one. That wouldn't be that hard to create.
Yeah.
You know, with the software. So I wish I could answer that question. I don't know exactly where you would go, but I would maybe just Google N-scale laser cut timber trestle and see what pops up.
See what pops up there. Our next question is from Robert in Florida, working in HO scale, who asks, I purchased 2 Amtrak P40s undecorated. My question is, what type of paint do you recommend? Enamel, lacquer, or acrylic? One of the 2 locomotives will be two-tone, so I'll have to mask one of the 2 colors. What type do you recommend?
Well, you know, it's pretty much all acrylic nowadays.
Yeah.
And lacquer was great in its day, but the problem with lacquer was, of course, you had to be careful putting it on plastic because it could eat certain kinds of plastic. And they're, you know, for health reasons and all that, the lacquer is pretty much out now. And enamel is usually, generally speaking, too thick of a paint. The pigment is actually too thick. So there are a lot of brands now. They're actually coming out with more various types of acrylic paints all the time. So I would definitely say use acrylic. All right. Use a good quality acrylic.
A good quality one. Our next question is from Don in New Mexico, who asks, can you use an N-scale locomotive to make an HO N3 locomotive?
Well, you could, although it actually doesn't come out in scale to HON3. It comes out to HON 2.5. So it'd be 2.5 foot gauge.
Not quite there.
Rather than 3. But people do that. You can use power trucks and mechanisms if you want to do, like, say, a little mining railroad or something like that. That would be a 2.5 foot gauge.
All right. Our next question is from Donald in DC, working in HO scale, who asks, I have a Bachmann HO Challenger and I created a beautiful small town layout 4 by 8 feet. The easy tracks that came with it are now dirty. So my question is, how do I clean them and what do I use that is safe and will not harm my tracks?
Well, I wouldn't, your easy track shouldn't be that hard to clean.
Yeah.
Unless they got really corroded or something. I mean, generally speaking, the easy track is nickel silver, which is pretty much corrosion resistant unless it really gets exposed
dirty
to something. But if it was really bad, I use just a fine foam sanding block and clean it off.
Lightly.
But then we've shown the track cleaner tool. I used talking about tools around the house. I've used a paint stirring stick like this one, and then just put a little kind of a shop towel around the end and tape it around there. Real kind of simple thing. Wrap it around and then put just a little bit of lacquer thinner on it. Just dampen it with lacquer thinner, and then rub that down the track so that along the rail, like so. And that would clean up any kind of just loose dust and maybe oily dirt that might be in. Also, you can buy track cleaning cars. If you have a problem, you can buy a track cleaning car. Like that Centerline brass car is great. And Tony's Train Exchange also makes a thing called a clean machine, which actually has a kind of a brass tank car with the drips cleaner out to a pad that rolls along. So, I mean, your track shouldn't really get that dirty. So it shouldn't. I wouldn't think it'd be that hard to clean.
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question.
Variety of answers in there. Our next question is from Jim in New Jersey, working in HO scale, who asks, in the years that you have been building layouts, you may have seen scenery techniques that change wire screening to hard shell and more recently building up with layers of foam. Do you have a preferred technique for your current projects, or does it depend on the project?
Well, I'd say it depends on the project. It depends on, first of all, how big the project is.
Yep.
In a smaller project, you can carve something out of foam, or use a lot of that gauze material nowadays, that plaster infused gauze material that you can buy from various places. That's really quick and easy because the plaster is already in the gauze cloth, and the gauze cloth is very strong, so you can just put it in water and lay it down. It's not as messy as, like, say, using hydrocal in the old days. On a huge mountain, we've used actually rigid foam ribs, or we've used actually plywood ribs to hold up a superstructure that might be of, like, say, start out with chicken wire, metal chicken wire, but of course the holes are too big and the senior's going to want to drop through, so then you have to use chicken wire and then lay, say, a screen over the top, and then do large areas with large shop towels as an example. So yeah, it really depends on the project, I would say. Case
by case basis. We have several questions from another guy named Doug in Kentucky, working in G-Scale, who asks, his first question is, what is the best way to make rock outcroppings on an outdoor model railroad?
Well, for outdoors, people are actually using, what's the name of it? It's the cement mix, the mortar mix, the very fine grit mortar mix. You can actually make a shape out of, you can carve foam, as we mentioned, carve foam, and then just paint over this concrete, well, it's like mortar mix, I guess they call it. It's almost like sand. It's not real coarse concrete. It's very fine sand that you can mix up and brush on. And then I usually mix up a little acrylic mix in with it, and you can use, there is at home supply stores, you can usually buy just a small container of just the acrylic mix for paint without any color in it, just the acrylic mix, like clear, flat, and you can mix that. It acts as kind of a bonder, and I like that. So that's what I've been doing. I mix up the mortar mix and then put some of this acrylic bonding compound into it, and that should be fine outside.
Sounds pretty sturdy. Our next question is from the same person. Do any track manufacturers still make stainless G track?
I have not seen that. Not that I'm aware of. We mentioned my buddy Tom at Only Trains. He's the huge G-scale dealer here in the Twin Cities, and you could actually call him up and ask him about that, or go to onlytrains.com and contact him that way and see what he says. But I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Well, there's always Google. Look for it. Our next question is from the same person again, asking, I have some Faller E-trains that are in the G gauge scale size but run O scale track. Are there O scale track available made for outdoor use?
Well, there certainly is, like, for example, Atlas track that has plastic ties. You could probably use it outdoors. I don't think it would be quite as heavy duty as, like, say, an LGB track like we have in front of us here. But I guess all you can do is try it depending on the elements. You know, some people will put their track up outdoors for the summertime and then take it up and put it away in the winter, so it's not, you know, laying under a blanket of snow all winter if you live in the North Country. So kind of depending on your situation. I mean, all you can do is try it, and if it doesn't work out well, I mean, I don't know, for example, how well the ties will do in the sunlight and all that kind of stuff. That they could get a little bit burned up in the sun. All you can do is try it.
All right.
But it's pretty heavy duty track. Duty track. So.
Our next question is from Gary, working in HO scale, who says, I'm running DCC. I find that with metal wheel cars, they often short out on turnouts. What can I do to avoid this? I run Walther's passenger equipment and find these to be the biggest problem.
Well, I can see where you're going with this. Passenger trucks have a longer wheelbase between the axle sets, and so they would be more prone to rubbing the backside of their wheels on switch points. And so what people do nowadays is they use switches that are called DCC friendly, where the frog is insulated and then the points are the same polarity as their corresponding rails. So that way, if the wheel does happen to touch the backside of the point, it doesn't short because it's the same polarity. And then the frog itself has to be insulated. I don't know if I could show you. Well, here, maybe I can do it this way.
We'll see. You can break it off of there.
Show you on this with the little camera. So the frog is right here, and so in a lot of the earlier switches, the frog and the points were all a separate, isolated piece of track work, and then they would get the polarity from whatever rail they touched down here on the bottom. But now with the DCC friendly switches, the frog is gapped. So right where my finger is, right about here, and then up here on the end again, up here. So the frog is the only part that changes polarity. And you can convert an old-fashioned switch into DCC friendly by just cutting the gaps and then feeding the point rails separately with a feeder wire. So that's what I would say. But that's very common, that the backside of the wheel ends up touching the point.
All right. Our next question is from Facebook. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to everybody who's watching us on Facebook. Right. We're streaming on Facebook and on the Model Railroad Academy website. But also, just so you know, Model Railroad Academy is on all your relevant social media channels. We have Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter. So give us a follow on each of those channels because we're doing different stuff on all of them.
Cool.
Just as a friendly reminder. And our question from Facebook is from Anya, who asks, Doug, what's the coolest layout you've ever seen and why?
Oh, I think somebody asked me this before once. Well, I'll tell you, when I was a kid, there was a guy named John Allen who was a model railroader in Monterey, California. This goes back over 50 years. And he was a very artistic, he was actually a professional photographer by trade, and a very artistic guy. And his model railroad was called the Gory and Defeated. I think you can still look it up. It was just unbelievably detailed. It had a lot of aura to it. It had real soul. I mean, it just told a story. It was mountain railroading, but done in his own way. And I became a pen pal of his. I was so fascinated with his layout.
Cool.
Well, anyway, so I was going out with my parents to visit an uncle in Oakland, California. Long story. Anyway, so I talked my dad into taking me over to Monterey to see John Allen's layout, and I could not believe it. It was just more more unbelievable in person than it was in photo. And of course, John Allen, being a photographer, he knew how to light it correctly, and he knew all about color and shading and all that, which was new to a lot of model railroaders. Most model railroaders weren't doing that kind of stuff in those days, and it was really unreal. So that would be my favorite model railroad.
Best you've ever seen? Our next question is from Tony, who is asking, he's been collecting for 40 years waiting to set up. I'm too old to do any more selling of all my HO steam engines of all types, Bowser kits, built and unbuilt. But like I said, all brands, models, buildings, mainly Western figures, etc., etc. Give me a shout out. Oh, this is an ask for a shout out. He sent an email address and said, thanks fellas and gals, of course. So hi, Tony.
Hey!
Our next question is from William, who asks, I'm modeling the northwestern Ohio farm country in N scale. I've read and viewed some videos in which the modeler has used static grass mats to represent corn, wheat, and other kinds of fields. What manufacturer makes such mats, and can you discuss the types used to represent growing fields in N scale? Thanks.
Oh, there's some great stuff out there. They're German. Let me think of the brand name. But yeah, they're available through Scenic Express, which is fantastic, probably the best dealer, online dealer of scenery supplies. And they go to a lot of shows too. But then many local hobby shops carry these mats. And I've actually used the mats not necessarily full size. You can lay them out like a carpet and glue them down if that's what you want. But I've actually used them for tall grass where I can cut them into different shapes and have little clumps of tall grass. And so I glue them down, and then I just have some long pins, like map pins, and I glue the clump down to hold it down. I just glue it down with white glue. Glue it, hold it down until the glue dries, and you get great clumps. And so, yeah, actually you could probably check Walthers too. Walthers or Scenic Express would be a good way to look it up online.
All right. Well, I have 2 questions in the chat currently, so we'll keep on going, but I just want to give everyone a reminder to keep asking questions so we can keep answering questions in the chat box below. Our next question is from Tom, who asks, how high should the blue sky background be to be effective? I'm working on a background for an HO scale layout.
Well, okay, first of all, it kind of depends on how high your layout is. And, you know, basically, people build model railroads for access, and the best viewing height, they say, to have it most natural, be about chest height for the layout itself, because then you're looking at the layout more eye level. I mean, if the layout's too low, it's like you're in an airplane looking down at it. So that being said, then your horizon line, they always say your horizon line should be, as it is in real life, would be at your eye level. Whenever you look out at a real horizon line, it just naturally is at your eye level. So. That being said, then the sky is going to be above that, and so there's a lot of compromise in there depending on how high your ceilings are and all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to go to the extra work, you can cove your ceiling so you don't have that square corner up there on the top. If you cove your ceiling and then light it, and then your sky actually goes around from being vertical, makes a curve around, and ends up being horizontal up there. And then the most natural sky lighting would come from behind your scenery going up. And a lot of people do special lighting effects, day-night lighting effects and all that. So I hope that's it's a long answer, but you know, there's a lot of variables there. So you can certainly, if you don't have a lot of room for sky by the time you're done, curve it around. You can buy coving that they use for sheetrock. Just like styrofoam cove kind of stuff. At the building materials place again, so you can actually buy a cove and attach it to your up there to your ceiling.
Oh, cool. Our next question is from Jack, who asks, Doug, do you have any tips on how to create a realistic wall brick with molded kits? The kit I have is molded with brick wall effects, but the slits between the bricks are too small for my brushes to paint the cement color in.
Well, that is tough depending on your scale. I mean, if you're real small, like N scale, it's almost, you know, impossible. I mean, if you to do anything 3D, because the mortar joint would be so small, you'd never even know it. But in HO, you can actually rub color into if you paint the brick first and then rub color into the mortar lines and then wipe it off before it dries on the face of the brick. And it may take you multiple coats. You may not be able to get it all at once, or you might accidentally wipe out some of the mortar line. You have to use kind of a stiff sponge, because you don't want to have anything too soft that would merge down into those mortar lines. So kind of a stiff sponge or stiff a rag wrapped around something real tight, so you're not pulling the paint out of the mortar lines.
Yeah.
But that's about the best thing. And like I say, you may have to do multiple coats to get it to turn out right.
All right. Well, I don't have any questions in the chat currently waiting, so I'll give you guys another reminder while I wait for more questions to come in. But we talked a little bit about earlier that we have a free download at the bottom of this video, so if you look below the chat roll, we have 10 household items perfect for scenery that you can click on that banner and get a free download, so you can learn some things that you may not have to pay for to put in your model, because we love those. And I'll wait a little bit more here for some other questions in the chat, but do you have any other tips you'd like to share with us, Doug?
Well, I was going to say, how about if we have people send in their ideas? You know, I mean, I have ideas, but then other people may have different ideas. So I think it'd be kind of neat if people would send us idea of household items they use.
Yeah.
On the
What do you
model.
use in your household or in your layout that's a household item?
Yeah, I mean, let's get some good, let's get some comments there and see what you're using. I just happened to bring those straws along because I thought that was just kind of a simple idea. But like I see, I've actually used the. I like the chopsticks for telephone poles because they're tapered.
Oh yeah,
and if you
they go
get
up
those
like
nice
this.
wooden, you go to a Chinese place and you get those nice tapered wooden chopsticks, they make a great telephone pole. And I've actually not only used them for telephone poles, but then use them for pole loads in a car. So you can actually make a load out of them.
Yeah. Any other items you use at home other than chopsticks and straws and stir sticks?
Well, I'd have to think about it for a while. But yeah, I mean, I use, you know, over the years you collect all kinds of crazy stuff. And, you know, if you go into, say, like a Home Depot or something like that, you might find, just walk around, and that's what I like to do, walk around and just look at things and, well, what could that be used for? It's like on that clip we had where the fellow used, was that a makeup container? For a water tower? So you have to kind of keep your eyes, eyes open, and just when you're walking around, and if you're shopping with your wife, you go, well, let me see. Well,
Think creatively.
Or in the grocery store. Same thing. I found shapes of products in grocery stores that work, or even packaging. Sometimes if you see something that's in that formed packaging, like clear plastic formed packaging, sometimes the form is great.
Something that you can paint and like use.
And then, in the clip you mentioned PVC tube. I've also used other pipe. I've used copper. You know, that copper, like say water pipe, and that comes in a lot of different diameters. So you can use that. Use a tube cutter and cut that to shape, and put ends on it. And you can use like small funnels for shapes. Like if you want a conical roof, you can use small funnels. We've talked about, I think a few months back, we talked about that flour sifter. Did I bring that in with a handle on it?
To put your ground.
So it's a little kind of a screen that shakes the flour out if you're making a pie, I guess, or whatever, you know. But anyway, you can put scenery materials in that and just take it and squeeze the thing, and then different
even distribution.
Yeah, different size sifter screens. I mean, so you can go to the kitchen utensil department and find all kinds of crazy stuff. Big spoons. You know, ladles, spatulas.
All kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah. So just keep your eyes open, and you might see something unexpectedly that. You know, I mean, sometimes my wife will do that. She'll, I'm getting ready to throw something away, and I'll say, "Hey, wait! Don't throw that away.
I want to use it."
I got a use for that.
Well, we did have some more questions come into the chat while we were vamping there, so hopefully some more come in. Our next one is from John, who asks, I'm about to glue down my cork road bed to my foam base. Can I use tacky glue like Elmer's Craft Bond tacky glue instead of caulk and still get a comparable result?
Well, yeah, you know, some people use caulk, which is fine. Sometimes the caulk, if it's not really fresh, can end up being sort of lumpy. And now what scale is he in?
It doesn't mention.
Well, anyway, so, you know, the smaller your scale, the more a little lump is going to affect you. So I have actually used
matte medium.
Ta-da! Matte medium, it works the same way. You can brush it down with a paintbrush, and then I think we've mentioned that in shows before too. I always follow a center line if I'm doing a curve, and so if you're using cork, that cork will lay, the two sections will lay right on either side of that center line. So I've used nails, pins, anything to hold that cork in place while the matte medium is drying, and that was the funny thing we came up with. It was years ago. You can buy, like, say, a 24-can pack of your favorite beverage, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and use the cans because they're just about the right size. Set
Yep.
out the full can. Don't drink them first.
Don't drink them.
You can always drink them later.
Yeah, there you
But
go.
use the cans and just spread them out. I spread them out right next to each other. Put, you know, you could buy 50,
Yeah.
you know, and just set them out on that cork, and that'll hold that cork down real well until the glue dries.
Yep. Keep it nice and flat.
And then I would seal your cork. That's another thing I think we've mentioned
Oh,
before.
yeah.
You know, the cork, if you don't seal it right away by putting a ballast glue or something over it when you get the track down, the cork can dry out. So
Yeah.
don't let the cork sit too long without putting some kind of a sealer on it.
Sealing it up. Our next question is from Paul, who says, "Hi Doug, what is the
Hello.
theme? What is the theme of your layout, and do your trains tell a story?"
Hey, well, yes, I think they do, and I like having a backstory with
Yeah.
a model railroad. I think that's real important as part of the aura, part of the soul of a model railroad. But I mentioned that before. I'm in S scale, and I've always modeled the Southern Pacific, which is kind of unusual for a guy from the Midwest.
Yeah.
But I think I mentioned this too. I went out to visit my uncle in Oakland when I was a kid, and went over Donner Pass in the back seat of my parents' car. And,
Yeah.
And that did it for me. I saw the Southern Pacific over Donner Pass, and that's it. I'm SP, and I'm still SP. But in my HO, I modeled Northern California redwood country, which is beautiful. I love those redwood trees.
Yep.
But then when I switched to S scale, I decided I wanted to do something different, and I always liked refrigerator cars. In my case, it would be Pacific Fruit Express, which were run by the Union Pacific and Southern Pacific. So my theme now is a Southern California, LA Basin produce warehouse area, and produce was really big, and I mean that in the old days the Southern California, the LA area provided most of the produce for the entire country. I mean it was huge. I think like 85% or something. So there's a lot of refrigerator cars. And I'm doing basically citrus.
All citrus.
And so I have a 2x18-foot switching layout in S. And I think I showed pictures of it before on the show. We can certainly do some more. But yeah, having an aura is very important. I think so for me, the modeling, the subtle.
Yeah.
So some people overdo. They just put too much visually on their layout. I like to have that kind of a subtle feel. And in Los Angeles, it's sort of a dusty, you know, in the mid-50s, a little bit grimy kind of an era. And so that's what I like doing. And I'm thank you for the interest.
Yeah. Our next question is from a guest who asks, "Have you ever used paints to dye polyfiber on ground foam? I need a special sage color that is not available."
You know, I have done that.
You have? Well,
It can be a
you're in
little bit
luck.
messy, though.
Yeah.
I've actually used basically house paint. Get the right color house paint, get a plastic bucket,
Yeah.
house paint, a little bit of, you know, we always use wetted water with a little soap in it whenever
Yeah.
we use water. So wetted water, thin out the paint to about the kind of soupy consistency, you know. And
Yeah.
you can also do a little bit of
Matte
medium in
medium.
there just to give it that acrylic bonder. And then buy yourself some rubber gloves.
Oh, okay.
And do this outside in the sunshine, because what you want to do is lay out a big sheet of plastic
Yep.
and probably stake it down in the corners or something so the
Make
wind
sure it
doesn't
doesn't
get
fly away.
Yeah, and then you take this polyfiber with your rubber gloves and dunk it in right in the paint,
Yep.
and just kind of squeeze it out like a sponge, you
Yeah.
know. And then set it on to into the plastic in the sunshine and let it dry. And that's.
And there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while to dry because you get a lot of paint on it, but
Yeah.
that's
Bit of a
worked for
messy
me.
job, but doable.
Works for me.
Yep. All right, our next question is from William, who says, Doug, this is a question who is referring to a previous question in the chat. Answering Jack's question about painting brick in N scale, so getting in between
yeah,
those silver
yeah.
outlines. For example, Walther's structure kits feature very fine brick detail, so adding a lot of paint will diminish the brick detail. What I do is airbrush or use a rattle can to paint the walls with the mortar color first. After the walls cure, then I lightly dry brush the brick color over the faces.
Well, very good. There you go then.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, if you have good brick detail
Yep.
for N, and you want to accentuate the mortar line, that sounds like a wonderful idea. I've heard people who've actually if the plastic is already the right brick color, you can actually do that and then actually lightly sand it back down to the color of the plastic.
Original color. Interesting. Our next question is from Anthony, who says, I started an N-scale layout about a year ago and have a good start. I love the time I have spent. However, the more I work, the more I see things that I could have done better or things I would have done differently. At the same time, I don't really want to scrap the layout and start all over. Have you ever felt this way, and what did you do?
Well, I think you always have to consider your layout a work in progress.
Yeah.
And you always want to tweak it up. I mean, to me, the best thing is to get the layout built. I mean, that's what I did with my layout. Build a layout, and I had some ideas what I wanted to do, and I think I mentioned that even for my buildings, I did cardboard mock-ups, and I'd set them up there, and I'd kind of look at them and see if I liked the shape and the positioning and all that sort of thing. And so you don't have to tear down your entire layout, but you might want to do a little urban renewal, maybe, or something,
Something,
And
yeah.
I don't think you should feel bad about that because you're making your layout better.
Yeah.
And, model railroading is a learning experience. That's why we call it the academy here.
Yeah, there you go.
And so, yeah, don't feel bad about taking little parts out. You can do it a little bit at a time. I mean, I like to do whatever I do. I do it subtly, and I like to make a little change, and then I'll look at it for a while and see what I think. Do I like it? Do I not like it? And then you can always go backwards or go back to what you had before. But I think that's the idea. Just always think of it as a work in progress. That it could always use some tweaking, no matter, even if you built your layout 30 years ago, you can always find something to tweak.
There's always something new to do in there. Well, at this time, this is all the questions I have in the chat. So I'll give them just a little bit more time to maybe think of a few more straggler questions. But on that, do you have any closing comments for us, Doug, or anything else you wanted to mention about?
Well, we were thinking about this time we talked about the products from the home we can use for model railroading. We'd like suggestions on other aspects of the model railroading that we can focus on and then use clips.
Yeah.
So I would love to have people send in their suggestions about ideas, and then we'll discuss them, and hopefully we'll do them and talk about the things that you would like to hear. I mean, doing model water is something that's. There's a lot of different ways of doing model water. You do ponds, you can do a grungy old swampy kind of an area, or you can do a waterfall, or water coming out of a culvert, or you name it, that kind of stuff. And that would be great to talk about, different materials that you can use to make water. I mentioned that I've done a waterfall with tinsel. I think we did that on a show way back where just for the form, I glued the tinsel top and bottom to kind of hold it in place, and then I brushed down actually not gloss medium but gel medium. You can buy the gel, and then you can actually make it make it look like cascading water using the gel. And then of course once you get the shape you want, you can add color. You want to make it foamy, so you can add this iridescent white color, kind of a glossy, sort of shiny,
pearly,
white kind of color, and that's the other thing. You can keep playing with it. You don't have to do it all at one time. Keep playing with it until you get it the right way. Make sure you have the correct lighting. The lighting you're going to use, the final lighting you're going to use on your layout when you do this, because if you change the lighting, it'll change the look of it. So there's an example using making water and using different products for making water. I've used the two-part epoxy where you pour it down and then it's completely smooth. It's super glossy, but it's completely smooth. And but you can put a layer on top of that of ripples with your gloss medium. So that's an idea. We're talking about weathering. I'd like to talk about. I like to weight my cars correctly. Make sure the running gear is good, coupler height is right, the wheel gauge is right, and then weight my cars. I like to. I have a digital postage scale, and I weigh all my cars to make sure they're pretty uniform in weight. They could vary a little bit, but in my case, my S scale, my cars are 7 ounces. And the reason I want them heavier is because I'm not pulling real long trains, but when I'm doing switching, I want them to couple nice. I don't want the car to bounce away from me. So the weight is important to me. So that, and actually I have a chart. I keep track of my. That'd be actually something else we could talk about. Would be to have a spreadsheet of the cars you own, and then the work you've done to them, and the weight and all that stuff. I keep track of the trucks that I put on, and just to keep them organized. And actually, sometimes if you're going to a train show, you can take that with you. I mean, mine is on
Yeah.
my phone now, but you can take it with you, and then you can, oh, do I have this car? Let
Yeah.
me see. Oh yeah, I do have this car, or I don't have this car. So
Yep.
it can help you if you're buying something else. So
Yeah.
that a database, like some kind of a database, we could certainly talk about that. I could bring mine in and show it.
Just let us know what you'd like us to talk about in any of the future Track Talk Lives. Leave it in the comments below, and we'll take your thoughts into consideration. But I do have some more questions in the chat.
Good. Okay, good.
All right, our next question is from Max's Hobby Productions on YouTube, who asks, I'm working on an N-scale 2x4 model railroad with a friend, and I will be picking up progress soon. We use small bowls and stuff for working on with plaster. The latter work is done in plaster cloth. So I think they're suggesting there that they use small bowls and stuff for working with plaster as alternative materials. And then they also say, what is the best alternative to caulking and sculpt mold for hardening the plaster on a model railroad?
Well, I mean, it depends. I'm not quite sure what he means by that. I mean, to make it harden faster, you can actually buy plaster powdered.
Or I think, to clarify, they're just clarifying that they think that is the best alternative to caulking and sculpt a mold for hardening the plaster on a model railroad.
Yeah, you can buy different set times of plaster of Paris from, like, say, a Home Depot.
Yep.
So depending on how long you want to work with it, you can buy, I think it's like a 15-minute set or a half-hour set and so on. And I actually use joint compound for just little touch-up areas where I want to apply it with an artist palette knife.
Yep.
And so that, you let that takes probably hours to dry, but it gives you time to work with it, and you can shape it and get it just the way you want it. And then, of course, any plaster, once it's dry, you can carve it some more. Once it's hard, you can carve it and shape it with a trowel, or you can take a wire brush and scrub it, and chisel, a lot of different kind of things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of options there, I'd say.
All right. Our next question is from Mark, who asks, I want to build my first layout, but will need to make one that can be moved. What is the best way or track to connect easy when I move in the next few years? I'm working in N gauge.
Well, I mean, basically, you just have to worry about connecting the joint, depending on how big a sections you want to carry. I mean, maybe it's only going to be, say, 2 sections. People would do that. Sometimes they'd even make a hinged layout that would hinge apart. You couldn't hinge it up or you'd smash stuff, but hinge it down and together. And any of the pre-made track will work for that. I mean, you just butt it up right at the joint so you can pull it apart. You can use luggage catches, like those snaps, like the old-fashioned trunks, that kind of thing. Deadbolt hooks. I've seen a lot of different ways where actually piano hinges for attaching 2 parts of the layout. So, yeah, I mean, just line them up at the joint, and so you have the gap right there at the joint. And then, of course, if you're going to be taking it apart relatively often, then you might want to just have a wire jumper between the 2 halves for the electric power, and then you might have a little plug underneath, so you're plugging the power sections together so you don't have a dead spot there. I hope that answers your question?
Yeah, I think so, a little bit. Our next question is from Lone Wolf 777 on YouTube, who asks, how do we send in our project pictures to Model Railroad Academy? You can send them to doug@modelrailroadacademy.com, or also if you're on Instagram, you could put #ShareMRA in your photo for a chance for us to see it on Instagram.
Well, we'd love to show photographs from our subscribers, so by all means, send them in, and we'd love to talk about them if you have questions that go along with them. And we've even talked about wiring diagrams. If they have a wiring diagram that you have a question on, you could actually send in a photo of that, and then we could go through it on air.
All right. Our next question is from Nathan DeLay on YouTube as well, who asks, do you have any scratch-built locomotives?
No. No, I know guys that do, and especially the guys of the old days that built them out of brass. I mean, that is an art. I mean, that is an art form.
Complicated.
I mean, there are not too many of them around anymore. I mean, it's so, I have brass steam locomotives that come from Korea, that were built over in Korea, but it is really an art form. If you can run across anybody or is in a museum or any place like that that has that displays a locomotive that was scratch built, a steam locomotive, it's just an amazing piece of work. It's like a piece of jewelry, really. I mean, it's so fantastic. So I love to see that kind of work, but I just don't. Well, the other thing too, you have to you know, in your layout, you have to have kind of priorities. And scratch building a locomotive takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so do you really want to do that, or do you want to do something else? And you know, in my case, on my switching layout, I have just 12 switches. And I had a buddy of mine, John Wickham in New Jersey, actually build my fast track switches for me, because I figured, and they're beautiful. And I only had a dozen switches plus a diamond, and why would I, you know, you can do your own, but then, you know, there's a learning curve involved and all that. I figured, I'd rather let him build them, and I'd concentrate. I like building structures and doing the scenery and detailing and all that. So it just kind of depends on your focus, too.
Yeah, on what you like to do. Our next question is from Lone Wolf 777, again on YouTube, who asks, hey Doug, have you heard any model train manufacturers back in the USA and making their products here? If not, why? Are there more people making products in the USA now, or if not, or are they mostly overseas?
Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Yeah, most of the plastics now are not made in the U.S., unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you know, they're having this problem with these Chinese molding companies are looking for huge projects. You know, they don't want to. If you want to make 1 million of something, fine. But if you want to make 500 model train things, So that's been kind of a problem. But you know what's really cool now, and last show I showed a little combination gas station, general store, railroad station that was 3D printed by Shapeways. Oh. And I mean, that's one way where you can actually 3D printing can be done here, or you can send your plans to a place like Shapeways, and they will retain the plans. I mean, that's part of the thing. So that way you share your plans. Once you have the software plans sent in, then other people can, you know, enjoy the benefit of your talent of actually making your talent then would be the software part of it. So I mean, that's really gaining hold, and the 3D printing is really coming around. I'm going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, middle of June, working with my buddy who's doing the Chicago Union Station, and I think I mentioned that he has a in-scale station built by a fellow named Jeff Springer in Baltimore, who does absolutely beautiful 3D printing and laser cutting. And then Don now is starting to do some of his own work, and I'll have more photographs when I get back from there to show what is possible with this kind of work. So a lot of stuff that you couldn't do at home, or it was just too labor intensive to do at home, now you're going to be able to do.
Oh, yeah. You can do it all yourself. Our next question is asking, is there somewhere I can learn more about bus wiring? So actually, if you scroll to the top of the page, if you're on the Model Railroad Academy website, we have a navigation bar that I think is orange. I'll have to double check. But on the very right-hand side of the nav bar, there's a little search bar. So if you just type in bus wiring and hit search, you'll see all of our information about bus wiring and hopefully find something helpful. But do you have any top tips for bus wiring?
Well, you want to use the right size wire. And I like using flexible wire rather than solid wire, just because if you're going to, I like to follow on the underside of the main line primarily, because you want to have short, small gauge wire. So I use solid for that. Wire feeders up to the rail. If you use a stranded wire, it can get, you know, when you solder it can get kind of fuzzy at the end and everything. So the best thing is to use solid wire on either on the bottom side of the rail or the outside of the web of the rail. But you don't want to have those too long, so you want to have your bus wire directly under the main line, and then so your bus wire would kind of snake around on the underside, following that around, and you can have holes in your bench work. There's a lot of different kinds of plastic strapping and loops and things you can use to support your wire, and then so when you have the correct size bus wire, but then also multicolor. Because you know what happens, like a year later you go into your layout, and if everything's the same color, you go, hey, what's what? You know,
what is what,
multicolor wire, or at least label your bus wires underneath periodically as you go along, so that you can refer back to what you did.
Make some sense out of it. Our next question is from Robert, who asks, I'm planning to build a garden railway, and like most people, don't have a huge budget. I do have a large garden, so size isn't an issue. Is O-scale the size to use? What size gauge should I use?
Well, I'd really recommend G. O-scale is not really designed to be outside, and it's kind of small and more affected by dirt and stuff. I would recommend G, and you know, you can buy if you go to train flea markets. A lot of times you can buy used track.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would say go to some flea markets in your area, see what you can find out for used track. Sometimes even on, like, say, eBay, you might find used track. to get you going. My buddy Tom, I mentioned in Only Trains in Buffalo, Minnesota, sometimes buys estates, and he may have used track too, so you could contact him on that.
All right. Our next question is from Tommy Needhart, who says, I have always wanted a moving highway on my layout, on a belt of some sort. Do you have any ideas for this?
Well, the unbelievable thing, if you go online, what do they call it, the Netherlands layout in Germany is just unbelievable. They have stuff, I don't, it's just crazy. But you could spend a lot of time doing that, and there gets one of your kind of your priority list. Is it really that important to have your vehicle moving or not? But I'm told they do it with magnets underneath the road.
Oh, that makes sense.
There's a kind of a track that a magnet runs on underneath the road surface, and then there's the opposite magnet in the vehicle, and then the magnet underneath pulls it along.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's, anything can be done if you set your mind to it.
Yep, if you have enough willpower.
Yep.
Our next question is from Mark, who says, my layout is going to be of the White Pass on Yukon route that I grew up next to back in the 60s and 70s.
Perfect.
Where can I find decals to make the locomotives and cars?
Well, those you may have to have custom printed. And nowadays, it's pretty easy to print your own decals, except for the white, because most printers nowadays don't have the white ink in the correct opaque white ink. But I guess what I'm told nowadays is that guys are actually taking an empty ink tank, like say you take an empty black one ink tank, and then buy this white ink and put it in the ink tank, refill it with white, and then you can tell the computer is black, but it's really white, and then you can kind of fool the computer into printing the white. But you can, it's easy to buy decal paper, micro scale, and I think Walther still sell blank decal paper. So if you can lay it out on your computer and get exactly what you want, then it should be relatively easy to print.
To get it printed. All right, our next question is from George, who asks, do you have any suggestions on how to collect up the loose bits on my layout after doing ballasting, scatter, and static grass?
Well, there are attachments people sell. I've seen them online that kind of a little muffler sort of deals where you can pick up static grass or ballast, and then it'll actually go into a little cup rather than in the vacuum, so you can reuse it. There are those kind of things. You could probably find them online somewhere, or with Micromark maybe that'd be another place to try. I mean, if you can buy a small, like a compact vacuum, like a handheld small vacuum, and then just vacuum it up and empty the bag and reuse the stuff if you want to. So there are very small vacuums that they sell for at computer stores, or probably online too, for vacuuming, say, computer keyboards. Yeah. Very tiny
very little
vacuums with a little tiny nozzle on the end if you really wanted to get into small spaces. So that would work too.
All right. Well, I have our last question in the chat here, and this question is also from Facebook. So hello again to our Facebook audience. And if you don't know, if you're watching us on Facebook, you can come watch us on modelrailroadacademy.com and watch all of our previous Track Talk Lives on the website. So come to our website and binge watch maybe all the Track Talk Lives from the past.
You could do that.
And our last question from Facebook is from Luis, who says, hello, what is the best way to weather an HO scale hopper?
Yeah, well, boy, that's a long answer. I mean, best thing is to look at some photographs of real cars and get some ideas. I mean, it could be rusted to beat heck. I mean, the thing could be like all rust practically. I mean, or if it's a fairly new car, it might just have some streaks of just dirt and grime on it, just from rain or dirt blowing up. And in a hopper car, generally on the end, because you have the sloped ends, you see the dirt kick up from the wheels. So there's kind of some little stripes down there from the wheels. So yeah, my best suggestion would be to look at some pictures of real ones, and then we will certainly do. We will have some more videos on weathering. We can talk about more specific things, and send us some particular questions if you have them.
Yeah, anything specific. All right. Before we leave, I wanted to give one more shout out to our free banner download below the chat here of 10 household items perfect for scenery. Click on that banner and learn some free things that you can put in your layout, because model railroaders love free things. I am Miss Choo Choo. This is Mr. Clickety. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us next month for Track Talk Live.
Thank you.
See you later.